What is up? It's your host, Abigail Crowe, and welcome back to the Alchemical Life podcast. This is a podcast that redefines transformation to help athletes prevent injury, improve performance, and achieve more in both sport and life. And this is episode 4 of hopefully, I think just 4 episodes. I think we're going to stop here of a 4-episode series on recovery for sport. If you have not listened to the previous episodes, go back and listen. They're pretty short. You can put them in 1.5 speed, get through them pretty quick. I'll see you in like 45 minutes. Otherwise, we're going to get into today's episode. I will go over a brief summary of what we talked about. So if you're not going to go back and listen because you suck, then you'll get a very, very quick summary. Okay, so episode 1, we talked about recovery. We defined recovery. What is it? We talked about why it matters, and we also talked about symptoms of under recovery so that you can figure out if you're not doing the right things. Episode 2, we got into sleep, not just telling you go sleep like most coaches do, but actually getting into why sleep matters and what happens when we sleep that helps us recover to improve performance, and what happens if we do not sleep to potentially decrease performance in the gym, on the mats, on the court, on the field, on the road, wherever our sport exists. So, episode 3, we got into nutrition. We talked all things macros, carbs, protein, fats. We talked about electrolytes, all the good stuff. We talked about not just what the macronutrients are, but also how you can start implementing them into your training directly around your training sessions so that you can use them to your benefit in your training session. And we also talked about just what they do. So not just giving you guys, hey, these are the rough percentages or the gram breakdowns of what you should be having, but also talked about, why carbohydrates are actually helpful, a couple myths around carbohydrates. Why are fats helpful? What do they do? What do we need them for? Why are proteins helpful? What do they do? What do we need them for? And then we talked about electrolytes and the importance of supplementing with electrolytes, especially if you are an endurance athlete or you are somebody that works out or trains in very hot environments or you're sweating a lot during your training session. Why having electrolytes matters. And let me tell you, I definitely figured out the importance of electrolytes when I was on mile 7 of my half marathon in Utah in the middle of summer with 5,000 feet of elevation gain, and I was getting an adductor cramp going under the barbed wire crawl. I realized just then how important electrolytes are to consume, because I was consuming them, but clearly not enough. So I was praying to God in those moments. And today we're talking about adaptation and efficiency in sport, why we need to phase out our training. I began to buffer very quickly. I apologize. But really, the body gets good at doing stuff, and that's what happens when we improve performance, is our body is adapting and then performing better than before. And so how adaptation efficiency is awesome, but also can be really not great on our brain, because we just assume, okay, so doing more got me here, so doing more of more is going to get me to that next level, and how that's not true. It's actually a lie. And if you continue to just do more, you will set yourself completely back. And the best case scenario is you just plateau, and worst case scenario is you get really freaking hurt and you potentially end up going backwards in your training. So the body's really efficient. Whenever we place stress on it and demands on it, and we recover from said stress and demands, the body begins to ready itself in some capacity to handle the same stress again. So when metabolic demands are placed on it, adaptation occurs. So not just on a physical level, when we place physical stress on our body, it adapts, but also metabolic and cellular stress on our body. Our body can adapt to those things. And so our output gets higher, our conditioning gets better, our strength gets better, our motor learning gets better, our neural networks become more efficient. We start being able to think more clearly. Our body begins to think more clearly. We understand where we are in space better. Our tendons start to become more stiff which is actually a good thing in this case, tendon stiffness. So we become more plyometric and nimble and all of these things. So body gets better at doing what we want it to do. This leads to less effort, resulting in the same output, or the same amount of effort for increased output, right? So we put in the same amount of effort, we get more out of it. This is just improved performance, right? This is what we want. Yes, rah rah, shish kumbah. This is what we want to see in our training. What then tends to happen is, and I see this across pretty much every athletic population, but I see it a lot across endurance athletes because endurance athletes are volume athletes. Like they're like volume, baby. Also in some hybrid athletes, some DECA people, some High Rocks people, definitely some CrossFit people. I see it. Also lifters, actually, I'll see lifters as well. Anyways, I digress. Volume begins, we just like more volume. Do more. Let's do more reps. Sometimes they'll progress in intensity, more weight, that kind of thing. But especially in endurance athletes, it's just like, let's go longer. Let's do more repetitions. Give me another sprint in there. Let's go, add another day. And so athletes, they see this progress and they're like, let's put greater effort in and then let's get more output out of it. Or let's just do more work, right? So like the effort's the same, but let's just like keep doing more work because I feel good doing the volume I'm used to doing. So let's just do a little bit more so that I can feel that burn, feel that fire in me again. That's the second. The latter is the one that I see the most common, which is just, let's just do more work. Let's add on more. I do see in the gym with my lifters a little bit more. I'll see more progression in weight. So let's just put in more effort into said lift session, whatever, and then let's get more output. But in my endurance athletes, predominantly, I see let's just do more miles. Let's just do more sprints, whatever it is. And in some ways, it's not necessarily a bad thought process because there is going to be additions in volume. Like you're going to have to add volume to have some form of progression. Progression is necessary. Like you have to progress to get better at what you do. But doing more and having some form of progression is not necessarily the same thing. You can do more and progress. You also can progress without doing more. So this is important to delineate because that's the purpose. That's essentially what a good coach does is strategically progress their athlete through some form of training block, and that training block ties into other training blocks, which ties into an entire year or 2-year or 5-year plan of training to help volume, intensity, frequency, duration, all of these things attenuate out into long-term linear progress. And what I see the most when it goes wrong is, one, the timeline it took you to progress at the beginning is the timeline is going to expand because as you start to reach your athletic potential, you're going to have to get much more intelligent about your progression in your training to improve performance. And you're also going to have to put in a lot more effort and intensity into your training sessions. So you're going to have to be very careful about the times in which you redline. You're going to have to be strategic about the times in which you back off because you want to get close to fire, but you don't want to get burned by it. And so a good coach phases out training plans with, deload weeks and periods of hard training, periods of easier training, periods where we're focusing more on strength, focusing more on sport, focusing more on plyometrics, focusing more on speed, whatever it is, so that you have these blocks to hit certain goals and overall progress on a longer timeline. Back to what I see go wrong the most is, one, they think that they're going to continue to progress as easily as they did when they were a beginner, which just does not happen. That doesn't occur. And athletes also often think that more volume is the best way to have some form of progression. And I think the best way I've heard it be put is by Jordan Shallow and the people on the Prescript team, which is where I get a lot of my certifications from, and I love that community. And they say, let's not focus on progressive overload, which is just increasing in weight. I also would say to my endurance athletes, let's not focus on progressing in volume and mileage, but progressing over stimulus. So just finding the right stimulus to help you progress long term, and that might be an increase in load, that might be an increase in time during the exercise. So slowing the tempo down and changing the tempo of the exercise. That might be shortening the tempo of the exercise by adding in a more of a speed element to the exercise. It might be changing the pattern of the exercise so that you are still pushing hard in your lift and the RPE, the rate of perceived exertion, is still high, but the overall load is a little bit lower. For example, this would be, instead of doing a heavy machine press, it would be doing a single arm cable chest press. Or instead of doing a heavy dumbbell bench press, doing a single arm bridge press. Instead of doing a really heavy trap bar deadlift, doing a super quick, I guess that would be changing tempo as well, but doing a split stance trap bar deadlift. All of these things are going to change the movement, but you're also decreasing the load while still keeping intensity or perceived intensity pretty high. So that's the importance of having a coach. Is one, the coach understands that there are phases in training that are required to help the athlete continue to progress and push without burning themselves out, without flying too close to the sun and then melting like freaking Icarus. Okay? Look at me, a literary genius. But also, a coach is there because they're unbiased. They are not you. And you are emotional when it comes to your training. You are going to be more subjective in your training, and you might feel really good and awesome, and I could just do one more mile. I could just do one more set. I could just add an exercise in here. Let me just throw a little bit of arms at the end of my arm day. Whatever. Don't care. And the thing is that extra volume is extra stress being placed on the body, and it's not strategically input, and it could be detrimental down the road. You won't feel it now. You feel good now. But the thing is the coach can look at this unbiased and say, this is where their volume lands. This is where I want to progress to over the long term. So right now, I want my client feeling good, because later when we get into this more intense piece of our training block, they're not going to be feeling good. So when it comes to endurance athletes, for example, after a race, there's going to be a natural period of deloading. Oftentimes, there's a brief deloading period to drop off in volume because exertion was so high during the race, and there was likely a pretty hard training block right before the race where you were building up volume and intensity and mileage and whatever it is. And so after the race, there's a brief period of chill. And then there's a race coming up 2 months down the line, let's say. There's going to be a progression up in both volume and intensity. And this will be delineated and well thought out, ideally, by a coach or an athlete that's really good at not being subjective with their training, which is what I've seen pretty much impossible. And there'll be a slow build. Sometimes there'll be in the middle of that, a dip in intensity and volume or volume. And then there'll be a higher progression to a peak, and then a very brief drop off right before the race. This is so that before the race, you're going into the race fresh for the race, which is what you're fucking training for. Instead of going into the race feeling absolutely butt-effed exhausted and unable to perform to the standard that you're looking for. You cannot redline all the time, because what happens is the line to which you're running to just gets shorter. You legitimately can't full sprint forever, and you also just can't full sprint to the distance you want to all the time at any time that you want. It's not possible. So ideally, when you go into a training block, you phase it out the right way, so that you might still have the same dips and spikes in intensity and volume, but when you spike higher than previously in your previous training block. You get to a place where you can go a little bit more. You can shave a couple of seconds off of your 5K time, or your 10K time, or your half marathon time, or in your lifts, right? You get a little bit heavier in your lifts. You jump a little bit higher. You play your game in soccer and you have a little bit more endurance. Whatever it may be, whatever metric you're looking at to help judge improved performance in your sport. Nonetheless, though, there still has to be a period of chill, because when the body undergoes adaptation, it's because what was previously there was a period of strategic recovery, and then after adaptation occurred, there was a push, and then after the push, there was a little bit more time of recovery to have adaptation occur. So what do we need to do? Well, sometimes you need to do less. If you're not recovered, right? If you're experiencing the symptoms that I mentioned in the first episode, which you haven't listened to it, this is the time to go back and listen to it. And especially if you're experiencing those symptoms and still maintaining a pretty high workload, you are likely experiencing effects of overtraining. This does not necessarily mean you're going into burnout or you're gonna freaking die or whatever. It just means that you're doing more than you need to. You are doing too much. I believe people call this overreaching, is the technical term, but regardless, you're doing too much. And this just sets you up for bad stuff. It sets you up to spin your wheels, feel discouraged, really pissed off, not enjoy training, and get hurt. Ultimately, like really just get yourself hurt and potentially have some serious hormone damage occur as a result as well, and it'll reflect into your bloods. So that's not good when you get blood work done. The body is going to adapt to the efforts we place on it. So if you're doing harder efforts for less results, and you have decreased performance and decreased quality of life, then what happens is you're not actually giving yourself any time to adapt. And that's no bueno. So what are the next steps? Well, let's first figure out how messed up are you? If your lab work's been showing decreased nutrient markers, hormone imbalances, if you've experienced more than 3 of the symptoms that have been listed in episode 1 for longer than a month, then a detraining or recovery period is very likely recommended. You definitely want to take some time. If you've got, especially if you're showing stuff in your blood work and the symptoms are there, then you're going to want a solid, and it's been an extended period that this has been showing, you're going to want a solid detraining period. If 3 or more of the symptoms are experienced for 2 to 4 weeks, then a deload week is likely recommended. If 3 or more of the symptoms are experienced for 1 to 2 weeks, then you could take 1 to 3 days of rest, or significantly... Do I have a fucking train coming through right now? A train is interrupting this podcast. Oh my gosh. If you have, I'm going to go through this and then I'm going to talk about it a little bit. If 3 or more symptoms are experienced for 1 to 2 weeks, then 1 to 3 days of rest or significantly reduced volume is recommended. And for each, the rest can always be extended, but I don't recommend shortening it more than the recommended. I'd rather you just lengthen it, okay? Because you don't want to be at risk for partial recovery, and then you resume training and you're like back to feeling like shit, and then you come to me and you're like, Abigail, what the hell? You didn't help me at all, okay? So let's go back to the top real quick because I'll make these a little bit more detailed. You got lab work showing you're messed up. You've got hormone markers showing you're messed up. You've got 3 symptoms showing you're messed up. And this has been happening for longer than a month. A full detraining recovery period is recommended. What is a full detraining recovery period? That's like not just a full deload. That's like an entire training block of less work. You have run yourself into the ground so much that your bloods are showing signs of chronic stress and volume and load placed on the body. It's just way too much. So you're going to want a training block that's 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks of chill, significantly reduced volume, keeping your calories up, making sure that your sleep is on point, making sure that your nutrition is good. So you're eating whole foods. You're not eating a bunch of just high calorie, highly processed bullshit. If you have 3 or more symptoms and you haven't gotten blood work or your bloods are fine, but if you're getting still those 3+ symptoms of signs of under recovery and you've experienced them for 2 to 4 weeks, then a deload week at minimum I would suggest. So having a deload week where you are taking your volume, whether it's running or lifting, and you are slashing the intensity in half and the volume in half, I would recommend. There are deload weeks where people will just slash the volume in half, keep the intensity the same. There are some where people will keep the intensity the same, slash the volume in half. If you're going to just do one, I would keep the intensity up, slash the volume, rather than, did I say that same for both? I would keep the intensity high, slash the volume, rather than decreasing the intensity and maintaining the same amount of volume. I would always cut volume over intensity. But ultimately, I recommend taking a 50% reduction in both volume and intensity for the week. Still keep calories the same. Do not change your nutrition. You don't need to go overboard with calories either, but definitely keep your calories up when you're in this deload period. The amount of calories that you burn from exercise, you guys, is really like minimal compared to your total daily energy expenditure. So just like go on your walks, hang out with friends, family, and keep your calories up. We're actually going to talk about how to, for the people who get really antsy when their training has to decrease, what you can do. We'll get into that next. But the people who are having symptoms, 3 or more symptoms of under recovery for 1 to 2 weeks, then taking a half week of rest or significantly reduced volume is something that I would start with. Potentially take a deload week. There's really nothing wrong with it, but again, if you're antsy and you're like, I really don't feel that bad, I'm just feeling a little bit run into the ground, take a half week where you slash volume and intensity. This is where I really would take both volume and intensity, take 50% out of the equation and just chill. Move your body essentially and just chill. What is going on here? We got all kinds of stuff happening right now. It's still not quiet. There are still people speaking in the background, but I have been sitting here waiting and I'm tired of waiting, so I'm gonna go and just talk. I don't even know where I left off. I think I was on the 1 to 3 days off and just cut volume and intensity in half. People, give yourself a few days. Chill. Hug your freaking dog. Also, do not change nutrition protocols here either. The only time or the only nutrition protocols that I would recommend changing during these deload or half weeks, or training phases are going to be the intra-workout carbohydrates. If you are significantly reducing your run time, then you might, or you're significantly reducing your training volume in the gym, you may not need as many intra-workout carbohydrates. You also may not need quite as many electrolytes during your day. That is the only thing that I would change. Everything else, keep it the same. Okay. Now, for my antsy people, this is me talking to me. And so I also understand that this is me talking to a lot of my antsy clients. You can do more. So when I have phases of training where my clients have to do significantly less, or they take a deload, or they have a half week, whatever it is, then I recommend a couple of things to them in their free time. If it's just to chill, it's chill. Go on a walk, go on a hike, chill, hang out, whatever. But if they get antsy, then change your run for something like a yin yoga class. Change your bike for something like a massage. Change your lifting session for a walk or a hike. Change your swim for a PT visit. Go get dry needled. Like, go see my girl, Dr. Haley, at Real Recovery. Hang out. Also, just be an adult and rest. Like, just chill. You don't even need to throw yourself into your work, because that's another form of stress and mental fatigue. Just take time you normally wouldn't have taken to go get dinner with your friends, or go to the beach with your kids, or call your mom or your dad. Chill. Take time to meditate, journal, sit still. Give yourself time to miss your sport too and appreciate it, because I found that sometimes taking a step back just allows you to appreciate what you're doing that much more. And so do less, but if you have to do something, do something chill. Go rock climbing, go do yoga, hang out with people, go get dinner, go get a massage, and make that be your more. So that all being said, there's a bunch of noise going on in the background. It's really pissing me off. So I'm going to wrap it up here. This is the end of the recovery series. I hope it was semi-helpful for you guys. This episode might be a little bit all over the place. I think I said that last episode as well, but I'm going to get better and more organized with these things. And I also understand that I'm Abigail freaking Crowe, and I do also go on tangents, and that's just how I seem to operate as well. So thank you guys for listening. The next episode, I have no idea what the topic will be on, but it will be fun, whatever it is, and you guys will know ahead of time. So thank you guys. Share this if you like it. Subscribe. I forget that I have to do that. Please subscribe to the channel. It just really helps me out. And please comment, tell me what you want to see more of. And hit me up on Instagram. Abigail.Crowe is my Instagram, and Alchemical Training is my work Instagram. And the fucking voices are killing me. So I'm going to go punch someone in the throat now, and I'll see you guys next week.